have on our show today GTI TV, Bob Nolan from the University of Indiana. He's Executive Director of Fundraising. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, what's your connection with Middletown, and how did we meet, and how did you get to your current position and all the different places you've been to?
Sure, absolutely. So going back probably 25 odd years or so, my wife and I moved to Middletown, where we raised our family. My wife originally is from Wethersfield, so it was a nice opportunity for us to come back to New England from Washington, D.C., where we were living, and moved to Middletown. It was a great area for us. We first met, our sons were playing travel hockey together, and did that for a few years, and started a relationship and a friendship between our families that's lasted, 25 years now, which is kind of crazy. But I've been in philanthropic development for, really since 2002. Started at Connecticut Children's Medical Center there in Hartford, working at the foundation as their director of corporate relations, and worked in several different healthcare organizations around Connecticut, but got into higher education fundraising in 2015 when I moved back to Chicago, where I'm from, and went to work at Loyola University Medical Center and was fundraising for the hospital and the School of Medicine, their School of Nursing, and was there for about 5 years. When COVID hit, there were a lot of changes at the medical center, and I moved from Loyola to Louisiana State University down in Baton Rouge and was doing fundraising for one of their biomedical research foundations. Was there for a few months and got a recruiting call to come back here to IU, where I had done my undergrad in the mid 80s. And it was just a great opportunity for my wife and I as empty nesters to be able to come back to the Midwest and really work to build a fundraising program here in our School of Public Health. So that's my main role. I'm the Executive Director of Development for the School of Public Health Bloomington here at Indiana University.
Yeah. And both your kids, when they're in Middletown, they went to two private schools, correct?
Yeah, we started the kids at St. Mary's in Middletown, where they were for a few years, and then moved them to Corpus Christi and Wethersfield. And they just had a great experience there, but both came back to Middletown for high school, my daughter at Mercy and my son at Xavier.
And what are some things you did with them as far as fundraising and whatnot?
Yeah, probably did a little more at Mercy, got involved with their development office, was asked to help out with their golf tournament and some other fundraisers that they were doing. You know, in a educational environment, there's always opportunities for fundraising for either scholarships or capital needs or program needs. And so was involved with those for a few years while I was there in Middletown. Was also very active in the community. At one point, I was a justice of the peace and was serving in a number of roles on the Conservation Commission in Middletown. So have always kind of had this interest in being involved and connected with the community that I've lived in.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. Thank you for that, because it's been wonderful. That's why our friendship has grown to where it is now. And, you know, we continue. I visited your campus this summer, and you took me around Indiana, and that was before they had the season that you've had in football. And then I had the chance of seeing Assembly Hall for the first time, and that was just a great experience. But the whole campus is just incredible. So what are some things maybe that you do when you go to a new environment, whether it be a hospital or a school? what are some strategies you kind of put in place? I remember you telling me about what you did for Mercy, and you grab their alumni right away, and even if they're donating $1 or $5, you just get them kind of being connected. Talk about that, if you will, a little bit.
Yeah, I think anytime you're talking about fundraising, you're talking about advancement. How do you move the organization forward? I think it's really important to be connected in an educational environment, to be connected to your alumni. In a healthcare environment, being connected to your physicians, your staff, your grateful patients, the larger community. You know, in Middletown, great example, Middlesex Hospital is going to be the largest employer. That's going to be true for a lot of communities around the country where the hospital, the healthcare system is going to be the largest employer. So it's a really integral, important part of that community. When I came back here to IU, I brought some specific strengths in corporate and foundation fundraising, what we refer to as institutional fundraising. And it's really an opportunity, depending on the kinds of programs and opportunities that you're trying to raise funds for. When you come into an organization, it's really important to know what that organization does well. What are the things that we're really good at? What are the things that helped us set us apart? And how can we leverage those opportunities to become more engaged, more connected with the community? So when I came back here to IU, really getting familiar with our dean, with campus leadership, with our faculty here in the school, and how were we making those connections in the community? And so it's really important to be aware of those things, to know how we fit in the community, to be able to talk about how then the community can re-engage with us. Spent a lot of time traveling around the country, meeting with alumni, meeting with funders who are interested in the kind of work that we're doing. We spend a lot of time talking particularly with corporations who are interested. We have a large biostatistics program here. And when you look at kind of the scientific community outside of higher education, whether it's pharmaceutical companies or other kind of science-related corporations, there's a huge need for biostatisticians. So those kinds of organizations are interested in investing in our students, not only for their investment in the university, but also because they're trying to create a pipeline of talent into their organization. So those are the kinds of things that we looked at when I first got here. We have a new dean who's going to be starting with our school in the next couple of months. Still going to be thinking about his areas of focus, what's going to be important to him, what are those programs that we might put additional emphasis on as we look to grow our programs and support our 4,000 students, 200 faculty members across the school.
I believe in Indiana you have 800,000 living alumni. Is that correct?
Yeah, largest living alumni base in the country, just over 805,000. Our school, I think, is probably the third or fourth largest unit on the Bloomington campus. We've got just over 32,000 alumni. About half of them are here in Indiana. So we look at our commitment not only to the scholarship, the research, and the community service work that we do, but also remaining engaged with that alumni base here in Indiana and across the country.
Yeah, and it's not just a one-time donation. You're looking for sustainable, their continued contribution, and then showing them that here's what your funding is doing, whether it's building an endowment or otherwise. I mean, you have those monies, and you have a great example with the football team now. you put all that money into the stadium rebuild, and it just happens to coincide with when you came back to Indiana, right? I mean, you came back
Yeah,
4 years ago. I mean,
yeah,
not
I think
saying that you did all of that, but you definitely helped, I would think, right?
yeah, I mean, I'm not directly responsible for athletic fundraising, but I would say that when you look at the success that happens on the athletic field, we talk about athletics sometimes as the front door to the university. It's a way that the community, that our alumni, kind of the larger world kind of gets a sense of who we are. And, we've been fortunate enough to, with the success that we've had, previously in basketball, now with football, to have, college game day or big noon kickoff from Fox come and highlight the campus and, really bring people into Bloomington to show them a beautiful campus, a stadium that is very different now than it was when I was an undergraduate in the 1980s. But it's really important to make those investments. I think the last thing that I heard from our admissions folks was that since last year, our undergraduate admissions are up over 6% over where they've been the last several years. And I think a lot of that is just the visibility that comes from a successful athletic department. I think UConn has had those benefits for a number of years. When you look at what's happened in Connecticut, not only with the men's and women's basketball teams, but you see kind of those downstream effects of those investments. And so it's really important to make those investments up front and have them pay off so spectacularly well.
Yeah, especially, you say 6%, and some people might think, well, that's not that much. And it's like, that's really big considering that people are strongly considering not going to school now, right?
Yeah, and you also look at the demographic shifts that are taking place. A lot of colleges and universities, particularly the smaller ones, are very concerned about what's called the enrollment cliff. And there's going to be a time in the very near future, and at some places it's already started to happen, where there just aren't enough college age students to be able to fill a full freshman class. For the last probably 20 years up through the time that our kids were going into college, we talked about it as kind of the building arms race, where every campus you visited during the summer was under construction. There was fencing everywhere. There were new residence halls, new classroom buildings, new administrative buildings. And a lot of that has gone on here at IU as well. And I think, we have kind of tapped the brakes on that a little bit and are really starting to think about, is it more students or is it working with students differently? You've seen the rise in online education, and how does that kind of fit in the larger higher education experience for a student? We want to continue to be a residential campus. We want students to come to Bloomington and have that very traditional experience, but also recognize that that doesn't work for everybody. So in our school, we have a philosophy that, particularly at the undergraduate level, if we're going to offer something in an online format, we're also going to offer that in person. So it's not an either or, that students can kind of mix and match and decide what works for them.
In the education and growing, and that's kind of Grow Together initiative. That's what this is about. It's about connecting all the pieces. So there's different ways to learn and grow. And that's something that you're offering and you're accommodating. I know all schools are doing a pretty good job. I think Indiana is doing a really good job with your support. Talk about the grant writing and what you do and what you can kind of what you can kind of teach others to kind of get more grants and get accepted to grants and whatnot. And how involved are you with that in University of Indiana or Indiana
Yeah,
University? Sorry.
yeah, not as much as I have been in some of my other roles. My work is primarily focused around working directly with individuals who are interested in support. But I've done quite a bit of grant writing and kind of that what we refer to as institutional funding space. But I still do a little bit of it, and I think what's really important for an individual faculty member or somebody who's running a program, and how do you secure that grant support? Um, and at the end of the day, I think it boils down to a couple of things. One part of that is the relationship that you have with the funder. So dropping a grant application on the doorstep of a foundation should not be your first interaction with that potential funder. You want to build a relationship over time. Again, we talk a lot about engagement, and you want to have built a relationship over time to really understand a funder's interests and priorities and align them with the work that you're doing so that they have familiarity when it comes time for them that they decide they want to provide support to organizations like ours or like yours to talk about here's where the fit is, here's what we're trying to accomplish, here's the work that we're doing, how do we bring these two things together to have a successful partnership so that we can achieve the impact that we're trying to achieve.
And building
Impact is really that second piece of that. You want to be able to say that we need this funding to be able to do this work. And when we're finished with this work, here's what our impact was. Here's the students who were able to access services, who were able to get a diploma, achieve their degree, whatever it is that the organization is trying to accomplish, you want to be able to find those synergies to bring them together.
Yep.
And that's really where I think most people kind of drop the ball. We talk about it in the difference between situation and story. When you talk about the fact that, I can give you 100 statistics about our school, the number of undergraduates, the number of graduates, the number of faculty, number of staff, how many classrooms, how many courses we offer, all of those kinds of things. That's what we refer to as our situation. Our story is what are we actually accomplishing? How many students are able to earn a degree and then find employment or go on to graduate school and accomplish their goals? That's very different from just kind of the raw numbers of how many students and how many courses and how many degrees that we grant.
Or even to have the confidence to start your own business or start your own foundation or do whatever, and have the knowledge base and the culture and the collaboration that it gives you a strong possibility of success in building that. It's a huge component.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of go back to talking about, when you think about the university or the hospital as an employer and preparing a future workforce, there are certain kinds of very specialized education that occur on a university campus. And whether that's, in the hard sciences like chemistry and biology and physics, or in some of the what they might refer to as the softer sciences or the social sciences, how do we prepare people to go out into the world and eventually be able to go to medical school, to go to law school, to become a psychologist? All of those things that are necessary in the community that under our current system, that's how you advance to those roles.
Well,
So
it's also the wives and husbands, how to be better wives and husbands, be better fathers and mothers, and how do you help build community and kind of help connect. And how do you see your involvement with what you do? How do you think you connect all those things and get people in a good positive position that they feel like they're contributing in a powerful way?
yeah, so I think about a couple of different things. And I'd ask you to kind of think back to when you were taking your kids to go look at colleges. And, we see families on our campus all year round. And I think to your point, they're looking for a community. They're looking for a place not only where they can kind of achieve their professional goals, but for a lot of students, it's where they really begin to find themselves as an adult. And so, what's that fit? How do you know, I met my wife on a college campus when I was in graduate school. So much of that kind of the rest of your life starts on a college campus. Um, and I think all of those lessons that you learn about, how to interact with people maybe that are just from a different part of the country or have very different interests than you do. We have a kids on this campus from every county across the state of Indiana. And some of them are really small rural counties. And they come to this campus and they're meeting kids from other parts of the United States, from other areas around the world, very different cultures, very different ways of interacting. And so in a lot of ways, a college campus can be kind of a microcosm, and how do you find out where do you fit? So I really like being able to support that kind of work. And it goes beyond just education. My colleagues and I across the campus are raising money for our student health center, for what goes on in athletics and rec sports, and the school newspaper and student radio stations and cultural events, like things that go on at the IU auditorium or the musical arts center with our opera and ballet and music school, and all of those kinds of things. And I think it's a really unique opportunity to interact and learn about things that you might not otherwise have access to if you're not on a college campus.
And that's a perfect segue into what I'm going to ask you about. Don't you think it's important for children, I say children, young men and women, when they're going off to college, right, to go on campus and do you find this a place that you can grow and you can kind of explore new things? And like you mentioned, you get diversity with the, foreign exchange program that some of these universities have, not all, but most of them do. But do you want to go to a smaller school or a bigger school and go on campus and see all the different opportunities to really grow as a person? Because you just never know, how you're going to respond to that unless you're put in that position. Because I also went to Kansas State, and I went to classes. I felt sorry for the kids that came from a graduating class of 15, and here they are in a study area like with biology or whatnot, and there's 500 to 700 kids in an auditorium, and wow, that makes it tough. But I think a lot of things can be learned from that. Now, if they're not going to grow in that kind of environment, maybe it's better for them to go to a smaller school. But I think that a bigger school does offer you some opportunities that isn't offered. And the same thing holds true for smaller schools, isn't offered at the smaller schools that is offered at the bigger schools. So what would you say to that? I mean, what would you say as far as, going to explore when you're talking to a potential student that comes in, and you ask them to kind of come on campus and see, do you see yourself here? Do you see yourself growing from here? Because if the answer is no, and if it's too big and you're intimidated, maybe you should choose another one. I'm sure you've had those conversations with people.
Yeah, we have those conversations all the time. I think when you look at a place like IU in Bloomington, we have 42,000 students on this campus. And I think about it this way, and this is what I tell prospective students that I meet with, or alumni who are looking for some feedback in how we think about ourselves and describe ourselves. When you come onto a campus like this, yes, it's large. It can be a little imposing and a little intimidating. But I think when you come onto campus, particularly your freshman year, that large campus gets pretty small pretty quickly. You've got your residence hall, you've got the main library, probably the student union, and maybe one or two classroom buildings that you're in your freshman year because everybody's taking those introductory kind of university division courses. And so as I said, those first couple of weeks, campus gets pretty small pretty quickly. And then as you get into your major program, get into your sophomore, junior, senior year, now you're probably going to one building on campus, one classroom building, where your program is housed, where your faculty are, where your advisor is. But again, it's some people like a more intimate experience than that. And so I completely understand that maybe a student will be more comfortable in a campus that is 8,000 or 10,000 students, or even smaller, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 students. And you can find a lot of opportunities on a campus that size. But I liked the fact that I came here when I was an undergrad. I did a stint on the weekends doing sports reporting on the campus radio station. I don't know that I ever would have had an opportunity like that in a smaller school. We've got, I think, 300 or 400 student organizations that cater to every conceivable interest in club sports and, academic and professional and service and honor societies and fraternities and sororities and all of those kinds of things that just don't exist on other campuses. They're almost like campuses unto themselves, or little kind of societies unto themselves on a big campus like this.
So you've been at other schools and whatnot. So do you use the same approach no matter where you are, as far as your approach in building that culture and building those collaborations and kind of communicating this to all the students to get their buy-in, because you want them to be successful? I mean, what do you say to that? I mean, you offer the same kind of opportunities as far as the experience is what you're looking for. Education, yeah, you have to do the work in school. That's a requirement no matter what school you go to. But the more important piece is what you're getting out of the entire experience. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I think a student knows what they're comfortable with. I think they know kind of what they're looking for. You mentioned student exchange or study abroad. We have a very extensive study abroad program here at IU. I have a student that works for me part-time. She's a student in the business school, but she spent a semester abroad in Australia. And, sometimes you can find that at a smaller school, but it can be a little bit harder, a little bit more challenging. We kind of think of ourselves as a more global university. And so we're going to have those opportunities that might be more easily accessed here than they might be at a smaller school. But I do think it's really important for students and parents to understand what they want to get out of that experience, and then find a school that not only is a fit, but also something that will help to kind of push the edges on that experience and expand that experience, so that you can get exposed to things that maybe you weren't aware of when you started looking at colleges.
Perfect. And the last parting comment. So what would you say to someone if you're trying to solicit them to go to University of Indiana, and you could be on the commercial that they're going to have with the playoff #1 seed and your next game? What would you say to that, as far as if you had a commercial for 30 seconds, what would you say?
Yeah, so I would really relate it to a campaign that we've been running for the last couple of years, which is Bring On Tomorrow. Here's an opportunity to come to a place where you're going to have a lot of opportunities to interact with different people, to learn different things, to be exposed to things that you might not aware that you would have a passion for. And so come explore, learn, grow, and then figure out, who you are and where do you fit in the world.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. And we'll try to have you on again in the near future. And thank you for your engagement with Grow Together initiative. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate it.
Thank you.